From this point on, the war against the Ing takes on a new shape. It is no longer reclaiming a distant land or restoring energy once possessed by the Luminoth. This has become a fight to preserve the center of their existence, history, and culture, the very heart that the Ing wish to cut out and destroy. The towering fortress hovers high above the sprawling Luminoth city, like a beacon of lost hope. And it is up to you to relight the fire and breathe life into the embers and ashes of this fallen city. The remnant of their creators chirp and beep away like the fleeting breaths of a once mighty warrior. Those with lifeblood left enough to wage war now turn their allegiance to the Ing, corrupted by their influence. All the while, the massive high-tech city carries on like a supercomputer, unaware of a terminal virus and definitely counting backwards. Samus marches on. The first unfortunate Guardian to be caught in the wake of Samus's mission is the Spider Guardian, and this time, the Morph Ball fight takes place on the light half of Aether, allowing you to catch your breath and plot your attacks as you boost, launch, and bomb your way through the zigzagging, half-piping, claustrophobic labyrinth, all the while avoiding the discharge of electrical energy emitted from the Spider Guardian. Truly, if this room were designed by the Luminoth, they studied some of Samus's adventures in the past, and knew that if someone worthy enough as Samus were ever needed to reclaim the Spider Ball, she definitely could. That, or we just needed another puzzle boss. Either way, after a series of increasingly difficult rooms to traverse, the Spider Guardian yields, and an important upgrade is acquired, allowing access to new areas of Sanctuary. Leaving behind this arachnoid rapscallion, you discover another fallen Keybearer lore, and their final words. After expanding all of their ammo and resorting to blade and fist, they wait as the beasts hiss and slither, approaching with overwhelming numbers.
Come forth, hated enemy. Let there be an end.
It seems the Ing, in their strategy, unleash their sheer numbers only when it absolutely makes sense. And when they do, they are absolute. In almost all the Keybearer lores, they recount a final epic battle, which leads to their demise, a fight against insurmountable odds and enemy numbers. These Keybearers were clearly a top priority threat to the Ing. They also poured out a flood of enemies upon the Federation troopers back in the temple grounds, when they, unbeknownst to them, found themselves on the front line of a final assault on the Great Temple. Perhaps the Ing saw them as a variable who could turn the tide if reinforcements were called. They also struck with force when the space pirates first entered the Dark Portal. Point to be made. When the Ing choose to unleash their true force, they do so with ferocity and in terrifying numbers. Since our first encounter with the Ing that compromised our suit, despite significant challenges and difficult bosses, we've yet to truly witness the terrifying numbers of the Ing army. And if they have withheld thus far to show that card, it's a sobering thought to wonder when that might come. The Ing calculate every move, and their intel gathering is proven by hijacking the Sanctuary surveillance drones above the elevator which leads back down towards the reactor. Every move and step we make through these hallowed grounds is being counted and monitored by the enemy. After a fastidious, elaborate puzzle involving conveyor belts, flamethrowers, lasers, spider rails, and moving platforms, and even Phazon, another missile expansion is added to the suit, and 2 Ing smashers in the room don't seem too impressed with your Morph Ball acrobatics. These Phazon Elite-esque hulking combat robots with their sheer size and mass pack a punch, or 2. Both of their fists emitting variable energy shields and energy beams provide for a fight that can quickly turn deadly. But the higher they stand, the further they fall. After rendering the Ing Smasher to the garbage compactor, the path is now clear to obtain the first key, located in the aforementioned missile expansion chamber, albeit with less obstacles to overcome, just a floor laden with super deadly radiation. And with the first hive key in the bag, a message is received to recover missing gear located at the bottom of Torvus Bog. But before we return to the bog, a familiar cloud of blue dots emerge and an ominous aura hangs. That can be none other than Dark Samus. For all her rage and an impeccable attendance record for getting in the way at the right time, she's one step behind this time. Hanging amidst the rubble, a few mangled spider rails remain, rendering the destruction of the bridge as more symbolic than anything. Back on Torvis, another guardian lays in wait. This is a period of gathering strength before the next push against the Ing, and with the addition of the power bomb, your arsenal grows significantly. Guarding this vital weapon is a tedious culmination of the gear you've acquired so far in Morphball mode. While not overtly difficult by any means, in fact the biggest enemy here is your own patience, this fight can take some time as the shock waves of the power bombs ripple out to great lengths, making it easy to lose your progress as you traverse the disjointed track of the spider rail conveniently leading to 4 bomb slots. After withering the poor excuse for Flagra's little cousin, the power bomb is yours, unlocking yellow shielded doors and a new potential in battle. And after acquiring another missile expansion, leading to an elevator back to Sanctuary Fortress, you are armed and well on your way and back on mission. The first room back in Sanctuary is the main research. It's not clear at least at first what the Luminoth were researching in here, although the room is heavily armed with combat drones. Whatever they were cooking up in here was useful for the Ing to capture and repurpose. One scan in this room again sheds light on the size and the scale of the Ing army. Torvis Falls tells us that after laying siege to Aegon and stealing the energy from its controller site, they laid eyes on Torvis. The battle saw thousands upon thousands of Ing killed by the Luminoth warriors. Still, they kept coming until their sheer numbers overwhelmed the Luminoth. When there was no more remaining to defend the region, as the last of the Luminoth there fell, so too did Torvis, and its energy to the Ing. Not too far from here is the lore-titled Shattered Hope, which took place just before the battles of Aegon and Torvis. In an effort to regain the energy controller, a critical battle was fought, in which some of the best of the Luminoth warriors committed to the Sky Temple. None returned. It was a turning point, both in the scale of the war, but also in the realization that all may be lost without a means to interface with the energy controller sites. Another way had to be devised. And speaking of new ways, with the addition of the power bomb, a new way out of the main gyro chamber is opened, allowing for the ascent into the upper levels of Sanctuary Fortress. And immediately, the silhouette of 3 dark pirates burst in and out of vision as they are hurled violently against the back of the wall of the room by none other than the foreboding Dark Samus. She lets out a victorious bellow of laughter before darting to retrieve her prize, a cache of Phazon tanks. Now unguarded, she draws the energy from the radioactive substance, no doubt adding to her power, and according to her scan, doing so at dangerous levels. After a quick restocking of our own, it's time for another showdown. The ascent begins. With an array of augmented weapons, Dark Samus unleashes her arsenal of corruption. Radioactive super missiles, volleys of deadly Phazon particles, energy beams that cut like a saw, and harnessing the power of the boost ball, she crashes through the room with kinetic force. In a rage, she brings down the elevator conduits in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Shifting between the rifts of the visible spectrum, she proves both powerful and elusive, far stronger than her previous encounters. But for all her speed, her power, and augmentation, she, like all other foes before her, fall. Literally. And briefly, those floating dots of Phazon particles drift away over the city below, as if to signal, we haven't seen the last of her. From atop of the ascent lays the expanse below, much like other views of the great city that Sanctuary Fortress once guarded, the technological might and the strength of the Luminoth. This same expanse in the dark half of Aether, however, is a much different story. An empty, hazy abyss circling around a central point like an atmospheric hurricane. While we usually find a dark version or a trans-dimensional flux of objects stuck between the rifts of the 2 planets, we rarely find counterparts so different or even non-existent. Armies often parade through the streets of cities they conquer, But as for the Ing, it's as if to say the great city has been swallowed up by the darkness entirely, destroyed and forgotten. What remains on this half of Aether is an abomination, an undead synthesis of organic and machine, a highway of wires that turns the cogs of war ever on. And atop the hive summit, the dark counterpart of a Luminoth statue, its shape bearing a mocking image of its creator. All around us are the reminders of the advancements of the Luminoth, and traversing through the fortress, there are constant hints of something more, something tangibly felt, others less tangible. With the addition of the echo visor, we're able to peer into the unseen, or rather, the unheard. Energy literally bouncing off the walls like a foreign language, now detectable and understood. The Luminoth use this sonic energy as one of their many forms of communication with their machines, acting like an audible passcode. As a means of interfacing with the Luminoth machines, detecting hidden enemies, and even revealing unseen passageways, the Echo Visor is both a practical and fascinating addition, one that will prove vital in the not-so-distant future. Inside the Hive Gyro Chamber, a key hovers over the now familiar humming sphere. Utilizing the magnetic pole of this machine, our recent upgrades make for short work of the second Ing Hive key, one step closer to our goal. And as we revisit familiar rooms on the dark half of Aether, some familiar scenery stands out. The impact site of the Phazon tanks before the fight with Dark Samus, but also Phazon itself, pooled at the bottom of the elevator room where the fight took place. It seems though the Ing possess the power to keep the worlds apart via the energy controller module, the great poison, that is Phazon, is present in the same form in both worlds. It stands defiantly against the alteration of the Dark World, as if not the, primary driving force. More dead ends, more machines of war and infrastructure, more morph ball mini-bossing, more precarious ascension through the maze. How fortunate for the Luminoth that the recipient of their distress signal carried the marker of their very own technology. For if not, who else could possibly conquer the heights and pass the tests laid before them? None other than Samus. Whether seeing it across the watch station or stumbling onto it by accident, the Luminoth picked this room of all places to catalog one of the most tragic moments in this war. Our battered forces gathered in the Sanctuary Fortress to prepare for the inevitable siege there. They didn't wait long. Wave after wave of Ing assaulted the greatest of our fortress, with one goal in mind: to siege the energy there. The Ing turned the machines of Sanctuary against our warriors, and soon all was lost. The energy of Sanctuary was taken by the Ing. Only one energy controller remained on Aether. Betrayed by their own creations as countless numbers of friends and family and brothers-in-arms fell, the elimination of those remaining in Sanctuary was exact and ruthless. Disestablishment of the Luminoth began in an arid plain where not much remained but a battlefield, then took to the lush and lively marshes of Torvus, leaving behind a torn and grieving landscape. Then the full-strength assault poured into Sanctuary like oil over water, contaminating everything it touched and devouring all without partiality. The last glimmer of hope, now the energy controller, laid in the hands of those now vaulted up in the Great Temple. And vaulted, not far from here, is the screw attack, held with intentionality for someone apparently as capable as Samus. Dipping in and out of Sanctuary and the Ing Hive and turning every pin of the lock, the vault slowly and meticulously opens, offering up to Samus the final item needed to cover the great expanse that Sanctuary presents. The final key is now literally in reach. One final ascent and the Ing Hive is all that remains. But what could possibly be waiting for us there? A giant sandworm? A colossal flying beast? Or a construct of the Luminoth itself? Behold, Quadraxis. The might of the Luminoth, the top of the food chain, their strongest and most formidable guardian, the final stop for any who would dare enter this most holy place within their sacred temple. This colossal mechanism is heavily armed and heavily armored. And heavy. With both matter-antimatter cannons and long-range missile batteries, staying at a distance is simply not an option, requiring an up-close and personal fight against the hulking construct. Like the quad-sentry drones before it, Quadraxis must be rendered immobile before striking precision blasts as its array of ranged weapons and heavy kinetic ramming attacks try to overwhelm you. All the while evading its massive feet as not to be trampled underfoot by this enormous behemoth. Timing is everything. Hitting the vulnerable kneecaps at just the right moments and racing away to safety, all the while taking advantage of the targets on the feet to drop health and ammo. And not to mention as your health slowly and steadily ticks away in this toxic atmosphere. Nothing comes easy against the final Luminoth Guardian. Wave after wave, the body of Quadraxis is weakened and eventually collapses in a heap on the floor, presenting the shielded head module. The brawn has been disabled. Now comes the brain. Defeating the command module requires the destruction of its guidance system, which emits sonic telemetry from its disabled body. This fight pieces together just about every upgrade so far, requiring a constant switching between visors, suit forms, and weapons. And the more damage to the head, the more desperate it becomes, calling forth minions to battle. But after enough critical hits, the armor of the head module shatters, exposing a magnetic weak point. Now frantically firing a volley of beam weapons as it retreats from your advance, the defeat is now all but inevitable. A disabling blow to the front of the brain disorients it as it wobbles and struggles to stay afloat, circling around its body like a vulture to its own flesh. A final strike to the brain and it crashes into the surface, disappearing in a cloud of arid black smoke, but uniquely leaving behind its body as a reminder to the Ing and all who pass by. At long last, the energy of the 3 controller sites can be restored. Where the Luminoth fell, Samus rises. Where the Ing triumphed, they now retreat. And where Aether has bled and torn, it can now be mended. The fleeting desperate acts of the Ing cannot contain the resolve to restore the planet and save the Luminoth and all who call Aether home. In glorious light, the energy of Sanctuary spreads over the planet's surface like a beacon of hope to all who witness. Umos nods in approval as the dying breath of his people fill back their lungs with new life. The body of O'Lear stands as a reminder of their sacrifice. Their hologram emits one final communication. A bow of gratitude, a salute, a redemption. What few remained gathered in the great temple. There all but Umos, the last sentinel of Aether, entered into life-preserving stasis. There they would remain, to be released once the Ing were destroyed, or to sleep forever. His people safe, Umos prepared for the last terrible assault. In the silence of the great temple, he prayed for salvation, for deliverance from the terror of the Ing.
The light of Aether shines from all 3 temples once more, and yet Dark Aether remains. One energy controller still shines in the darkness, sustaining the world. The Sky Temple, dark shadow of this hollow place, holds the final energy controller. The greatest and most powerful beast of the Ing keeps guard over what you see. The 9 keys to the Sky Temple have been hidden in each land of the Dark World. Finding them will be perilous, but I offer you this blessed suit of armor, energized by the light of Aether itself. Its power will help you reach these final keys. May it serve you well in the darkness.
The light of Aether, the very life force of the planet, fills your suit, emitting jets of energy as if to say, the light can be harnessed, but it cannot be contained. You are now the ambassador of the planet, a living key to unlock the vault of darkness, which holds the final energy controller, the final string holding up the banner of war and strife. But though we literally walk in the light, first the final door must be opened with the gathering of the Sky Temple keys. Those who came before, the key bearers, who sacrificed themselves on the battlefield, are our final clues to the location of these keys. So to find the keys, we must first find their bodies. A brutal reminder, in this war, even the dead serve the living. Using the power of the light suit, Samus can now teleport from temple to temple, hastening passage throughout the planet. Now the hunt is on, the final leg of this race. Stopping first in Aegon, and with our tech gathered throughout our travels, access to Allure takes us back to the very beginning of this conflict. In fact, before the conflict began. The stellar object. By the time we detected the stellar object as it streaked across our world, it was too late to stop it. We fired numerous weapons at it in a vain attempt to alter its trajectory. Nothing worked. Our efforts placed a great strain on the energy controllers and weakened Aether. All we could do as the object drew closer was take shelter and wait. We gathered stores of food and water, reinforced the shielding on our dwellings, and spent the last hours in peace. It's sobering to consider the amount of effort the Luminoth expended in an attempt to send the stellar object off course. So much energy that the planet itself was weakened. Could this be a catalyst as to why the planet was torn in two? Could the efforts to stave off the object of corruption be the very reason the corruption took place? If so, who could blame their efforts? With impending doom ticking down, the Luminoth chose to spend the final few hours before destruction in peace. This was evening on the final day, before all they knew was war. Now in the trial grounds, where the Ing tested and groomed their young for battle, a Luminoth lays against the wall, a victim of the Ing's ceremonial rites of passage. Like a gladiator in an arena, this Luminoth died with no name, no hope, no honor, no chance of survival. A dark reminder of why we're here. While we are here in this chamber of strife, why not pick up a weapon? The Dark Burst, an absolute monster of a weapon. Spooling up 5 missiles and merging it with dark energy, it launches a singularity, crushing everything it intercepts like a truck. The closer we are to the light, the more dark energy we can harness, and the more we can survive. Here in the Dark Oasis, neither the Ing Storm or the Dark Water can prevent the gathering of this Sky Temple key, putting the absolute pinnacle of the Luminoth minds to the test, creating a suit that could withstand the most potent forces of the Ing. Not only this, but the very toxic atmosphere that was impassable without the help of the light crystals now poses zero threat. Up until this moment, even with the help of our upgrades, the atmosphere was lethal. No more. In this final chapter, Samus presses forward like an unstoppable force to the bitter end. And adding to her force is the sonic boom, courtesy of this lethal hellhole, the Phazon sight. For all her weapons, for all her armor, still Phazon poses a threat. Thankfully, the creatures guarding these keys don't. The flying Ing cache, invisible without the aid of the dark visor, can actually be interacted with undetected. If stumbled upon by accident or while on the hunt, they have no way of defending themselves. They simply exist as a living container to house the keys stripped from the Luminoth key bearers. While these keys being hidden in the dark corners of Ing-occupied territory instead of, perhaps, under the Emperor Ing's lap, may not be the most sound strategy, it shows their misguided confidence to hide these keys in plain sight. Who could pass the lethal radioactive Ing storms, the pestilent dark waters, and hidden alcoves behind endless waves of warrior Ing? All this for keys scattered among the chaff for safekeeping. But no more. With each key is the realization that this is our last time in this region. One last visit to Aegon. One last visit to Torvus. One last visit to Sanctuary Fortress. And one last visit to the temple grounds. And the hunt ends where our hunt began. In the humble crater left by our gunship as we smashed into the surface of the planet. It all comes full circle in the Hall of Eyes. The Ing have observed your every move and spent all they could to counter. Umos, meanwhile, keeping watch and holding out hope. Now all eyes are on you as you travel back to Dark Aether for one final time, either to your death or to the salvation of the entire planet. Samus approaches.
The time draws near. Hear the words of Akul, she they call champion of Aether. Know that my warriors fought and died with uncommon valor. Do not look unkindly upon their failure, for they died to save us all.
The door is opened. In the center of this corrupted temple lies the final dark energy controller, guarded by the most heinous enemy, the Emperor Ing. All around the circumference of this Colosseum is a ring of deadly phazon, empowering the beast and containing you. Pinned at an uncomfortably close range to this potentate of darkness, the stage is set for one final showdown. The metamorph of the Emperor Ing head has molded itself around the energy controller, and guarding it with tentacles that launch massive spikes of dark energy and swing at you with heavy kinetic force. Striking the tentacles reveals the core of the creature, which is shielded by two halves. The gap in the middle shows a vulnerable point, but allows the Emperor to fire a deadly beam of energy, knocking you back into the phazon and staggering you, causing your weapons to be lowered as you gain back your feet. As its health ticks away, the Supreme Leader gets angrier and more frantic. More tentacles, more successive swings, more precious ammunition expended at its critical points. Each strike to the head is a battle blow in the name of the Luminoth who came before, none of which returned from the Sky Temple, a chance to do what they could not. The head shrivels into itself, letting out a billow of noxious gas, the likes of which not even the light suit can repel. Out of this deflated heap, the Emperor Ing chrysalis is revealed. A chrysalis. A chrysalis? As in the protective casing, the likes of which Sheikah slumbered inside of as they developed and morphed? Phase 2 of this fight is against a sleeping bag? Surviving this first form was a triumph in itself. And this fight has yet to begin. What could possibly be kept under lock and key within this chrysalis? As countless waves of inglets descend and tentacles frantically strike back, knocking you into the deadly gas, the surface of this casing slowly cracks open with every successive bomb. A time to take things slowly, stock up on health, calm the nerves before whatever emerges from within this thing breaks out. The chrysalis shatters. Samus stands her ground. The mutated Emperor Ing emerges, roars, and charges into the fight. Having been mutated further by the phazon around it, its rage and determination are matched only by its might and tenacity. Scanning the beast tells us that only the heart can be damaged, and to find a way to do so. So with little helps from our scans, the only option is to unleash the arsenal of weapons we have and see what takes. As a wielder of the light, maybe it's fitting to spray and pray. The only target, a soft spot within the mouth of the creature, is protected by impenetrable armor, requiring precarious timing to strike the target. Further adding to the difficulty is the creature's fifth forward leg, which acts both as a shield and a weapon, striking with incredible force. Further still, it darts from side to side with speed and frequently closes its mouth, allowing for only a few precious moments to possibly score a hit. As for attack moves, it summons 6 beams of transdimensional energy which penetrate your armor, knocking you back into the phazon like its tentacles did in Phase 1, and when enraged, it charges at you with enormous force. Finally, after cracking its shield, its core is weakened, requiring opposite polarity of light or dark weapons to damage the heart. Summoning night barbs and light swarms out of its crown in an attempt to block critical shots, Samus is able to gather what seldom health and ammo that this fight has to offer, at a cost of not doing damage to the Emperor when doing so. As the fight progresses, the creature makes more frequent attempts to charge and skewer Samus, causing huge kinetic damage and causing ripples of dark energy to flow across the surface of the floor. It alternates polarity more quickly when vulnerable, anything to throw Samus off her guard, anything to prolong this fight. Attrition has long been the war strategy of the Ing, and you stand before their strategist now, desperate and looking for a way out. But there is no escape. There will be no quarter, and there will be an end. The light of Aether ejects out of the husk of the Emperor as it explodes into a cloud of purple particles reminiscent of that of Dark Samus. Is it really over? Have we seen the last of the Ing? The energy controller rests at peace in the center of the room. Samus retreats it and unleashes chaos. Planetary condition critical. Escape at once. With the collapse of the entire planet imminent, Samus darts for the portal back to Light Aether, when none other than Dark Samus, who just simply can't take a hint, emerges. Faceless, fearless, and now having absorbed a tremendous amount of Phazon. Too much, perhaps. In order to maintain stability from going critical, she vents pure Phazon energy in deadly blasts. She dips in and out of the visible spectrum, even undetectable by the dark visor. The Echo herself is invulnerable when venting her Phazon beams and seen only using the Echo visor when she dips transdimensionally. The more damage she takes, the more unstable she becomes, eventually becoming more corrupted than she's able to control. Enveloped in a shield of pure Phazon, she emits radioactive particles that can be drawn in by charging up a weapon and firing back at her, much like the previous fight with Metroid Prime. The source of her power has become the source of her destruction. Her suit compromised, body corrupted by Phazon, and helmet removed, the skeletal remains of Dark Samus limps as it approaches the victor. Fading out of existence, it grasps forward in one last attempt to take hold of Samus. But before she does, she fades into the all-familiar cloud of blue dots and disappears. Perhaps for the last time, perhaps not. As in your inaugural trip to the Sky Temple grounds, warriors descend on you in numbers. With moments to spare before complete destruction, an explosion in the back wall reveals a portal to the light world, as if in the end, the unstable planet itself provides a way out. Samus swiftly escapes as the dark portal descends into judgment. The squeals and roars are silenced as the portal is closed for good, trapping the Ing between dimensions, a fate worse than death. The storms around Aether cease as the planet comes to rest. As the light of Aether roars like a stoked flame within the great temple, the teleporter closes and the champion returns. But not to Umos alone. The precious few survivors, alerted by the Sentinel, emerge from their stasis chambers to greet Samus upon her return. Barely rising up to their knees, Samus looks up at the room of survivors, a sight she's yet to see all along her journey. Where before there were lifeless statues of the Chozo carved from stone, the ghosts of their dead, possessed Federation troopers and the countless numbers of Luminoth bodies strewn about her journey. This is a first. Living, breathing survivors. As in their holograms before, Samus receives a salute with a bow of gratitude as she waves on as if to say, "See you later," as she steps into the light and departs. All in a day's work of saving another planet. So as for her GameCube journey, Stories Retold comes to an end. So let's look back at a few things that makes Echoes stand out. This video series started with a video originally titled The Dark Story of Metroid Prime. And for all intents and purposes, the sequel of this series truly is darker. The story itself follows an entire planet, and all who call it home being torn interdimensionally into the dark. While we encounter some rather dangerous and powerful foes in Prime, the face of darkness incarnate, the Ing, are present and lurking around every corner in Echoes. In fact, the name itself denotes that something is off in the distance calling out, like a vestige of a voice no longer fully distinguishable or even fully present. The voice of the Luminoth dims into a light like that of a flickering candle, just soft enough and bright enough to discern shadows in a room. And the once flourishing nation slips into the dark with every log, every lore, and every count of their demise. They are for us the faint echo of a once mighty voice. And what's more, another familiar voice reappears and echoes off the walls of Aether. The voice of none other than the shadowy doppelganger, Dark Samus. Mysterious, cunning, and calculating, she is the reverberating reanimation of Metroid Prime. And though the former apex predator becomes more of a victory lap after the death of the Emperor Ing, it's worth noting Dark Samus's keen ability of showing up. Showing up like that of an echo. She's like a monster in a closet, but turning on the lights doesn't make her go away. Instead, she finds a way of re-existing after every single encounter. And speaking of re-existing, some time must be spent on the bigger picture, the restoration of Aether. Aether is a fascinating planet. It is generally assumed that rogue planets, that is, planets without stars, are unable to sustain life. Without the gravitational pull to establish stability, the light to sustain plants and organics, and therefore chemicals needed to produce and maintain an atmosphere, a rogue planet is all but certain to be a cold, dead rock floating in the darkest corners of a galaxy. But Aether is no ordinary rock. The mystery behind the light of Aether is part of its glory. While we aren't really given enough information through the lore to understand its source, we understand what it does. It is the sustaining power that a star does to shepherd a planet. But rather being bathed from an external source, it is produced internally, within the planet. The Luminoth possess the mind to calculate and the bond with the planet in order to harness this light to build their civilization, but also to care for the planet itself. They become Aether's caretakers, even up to the day when the colossal object fell, using the power behind the light of Aether in an attempt to repel the object. Despite the futility to prevent the catastrophe, it is poetic that the caretakers of the planet attempted to use the very life-giving essence of this planet to save it from disaster. And in the end, ultimately do succeed vicariously through Samus as the Lightbringer to the dark half of Aether. To that end, my final observation of what makes Echoes stand out is that the stakes are higher and the payout is greater. While scouring the ruins of the Chozo and venturing to the reaches of Phendrana, even to the depths of the planet, we ultimately discover that our efforts are partly in vain to save Talon 4. We are too late to save the Chozo. The payout for our victory is watching their most holy site be destroyed in the wake of the collapse of the impact crater. a bitter end, and a necessary cost that came in order to complete our mission. And chronologically speaking, at this point, we are still uncertain as to the fate of Talon 4. That answer comes later. But here on Aether, the stakes are different. We walk among the remnant of the Luminoth. We are face to face with the very enemy responsible for their genocide. And we are able to walk out victoriously in the presence of those who remain. This time, your departure is witnessed by those you came to save. So we can continue on, knowing that the Book of Aether can once and for all be closed.